The fog over the eastern ridge hung low that morning, clinging to the burnt trees like ghosts from the night before. The battlefield below was quiet, too quiet for a front line that had seen nothing but chaos for weeks. Soldiers on both sides knew the silence wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that comes just before something breaks. Radios crackled softly, boots shifted in the mud, and eyes scanned the horizon waiting for the next move in a war that had already taken far too much. But none of them knew that in the next hour, a single machine no bigger than a bird would rewrite everything that commanders, soldiers, and tacticians had believed about this conflict. The 3rd Battalion had been stuck in the valley for 9 days. Supplies were running thin, morale was breaking, and the enemy, entrenched deep in the hills, held every advantage. They controlled the high ground, the artillery angles, and most importantly, the roads. Every attempt to move forward ended the same way, explosions ripping through the earth, metal shrapnel slicing the air, and bodies being carried back on stretchers. The battalion commander, Colonel Rami, had become a shadow of himself, eyes sunken, voice hoarse, and fingers always tapping on the edge of the map table. The enemy bunker on Hill 47 was the key. Until it fell, no progress could be made. But every conventional strike had failed. Jets were shot down, artillery was inaccurate, infantry couldn't get close enough, the bunker was a fortress. Then, just after dawn, a young operator named Terk approached the command tent. He was quiet, analytical, and known more for his engineering skills than his battlefield presence. But today he walked in holding a case, black, scratched, and small. Inside it was something he had been working on for weeks without approval, a modified tactical drone, barely detectable, equipped with a custom-built guidance system and a shaped explosive charge he had designed himself. Rami stared at it for several seconds before he finally spoke. "Does it work?" Terk nodded. "It has to. We don't have another choice." Outside, the men gathered as the drone was armed. No one believed a small device like that could do what artillery and airstrikes had failed to accomplish. But desperation changes everything. When the signal was given, the drone lifted into the mist, its tiny rotors almost whisper, silent. It rose above the valley, gliding forward like a hawk searching for prey. The enemy never saw it coming. The bunker on Hill 47 was built into the side of a rock formation. Reinforced concrete, steel doors, layers of sandbags, and an underground command post. Normally, drones were jammed or shot down before they got anywhere near it. But Terk's design flew low, weaving between trees, hugging terrain, and using the environment as camouflage. It moved like something alive. Inside the bunker, enemy officers studied intercepted communications, confident the valley was secured. They believed their position was unbreakable. They didn't know that death was already hovering just meters above their heads. The drone found the intake vents, small, rusted, but unprotected. Terk locked the targeting coordinate. His thumb hovered over the trigger. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then he pressed the command. The explosion wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The charge detonated inside the ventilation shaft, forcing a shockwave through narrow tunnels and igniting ammunition stacked within the walls. What followed was a chain reaction. The bunker trembled, then buckled, then erupted outward as an inferno roared through the hillside. Flames shot into the sky, earth collapsed inward, and the command center that had controlled the entire region was gone in seconds. The valley went silent again, but this time the silence wasn't fear, it was disbelief. On the ridge, enemy soldiers panicked, their communications fell apart, their orders vanished, and their commanders were buried in the rubble. For the first time in weeks, the high ground was vulnerable. Colonel Rami didn't hesitate. He ordered the advance. The battalion surged forward with a force that surprised even themselves. Machine gunners moved to flanking positions, medics ran with renewed strength, and infantry stormed the ridge, shouting over the explosions. The enemy tried to recover, but without the bunker's command structure, their defenses crumbled. Some fled, some surrendered, some fired blindly into the fog, but none of it mattered. The momentum had shifted, the impossible had become possible. By noon, the battalion stood atop Hill 47, the flag was raised. For the first time in days, Rami allowed himself to breathe. Reporters would later call it the turning point of the campaign. Analysts would claim it was strategy, timing, or tactical superiority, but the soldiers who were there knew the truth. It was a single drone, a tiny machine built from spare parts, piloted by a young operator with an idea everyone else thought was madness. One drone that flew into a fortress and shattered the balance of power. As the dust settled, Terk stood quietly beside the ruins. He wasn't cheering with the others. Instead, he stared at the smoke rising into the sky, realizing what had just happened. A weapon he designed had changed the course of a battle, maybe even the war. And with that realization came something heavier than pride, the understanding that modern warfare had crossed another line. Battles could turn not by thousands of soldiers, but by one person with the right tool. Later that evening, as the sun set behind the ridge, a message came from High Command. The victory had opened a supply route, saved 3 trapped units further south, and forced the enemy to retreat from 2 additional positions. All because of a device small enough to fit into a backpack. Colonel Rami walked over to Terk. The campfire lit their faces with a soft orange glow. "You changed the battle," Rami said quietly, "maybe the whole war." Terk shook his head. "I didn't change the war," he answered softly. "The war changed us. It pushed us to fight in ways we never imagined." And he was right. That single drone strike became a symbol, a reminder that warfare no longer depended on size, strength, or numbers. Today, precision mattered more than power. Innovation mattered more than firepower. And one soldier with the right invention could alter the fate of thousands. The story of the drone attack spread quickly. Soldiers whispered it around campfires, civilians shared it across radios, and on the enemy side it created fear. Fear that any bunker, any position, any fortress could be breached. Fear that the next attack might not come from the sky in the form of jets or artillery, but from something silent, invisible, and unstoppable. War historians would someday write entire chapters about the Battle of the Eastern Ridge and how Hill 47 fell. But those who lived it would always remember one thing. Triumph came not from overwhelming force, but from a spark of creativity born in the darkest moments of desperation. Even years later, veterans would look back and say, "Everything changed the day that drone took flight." And when they said it, they weren't talking about technology. They were talking about the moment when hopes, small, fragile, and improbable, rose into the air and turned the tide of a war that had seemed already lost. That is how a single drone attack, launched by a lone operator in a desperate hour, changed the course of the battle, not through sheer destruction, but through the power of innovation, courage, and the belief that even the smallest action can echo across history.